Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What'd I do? I did something. Let me check.
It's never good when you have the countdown of 5, 3, 2, 1. Uh-oh.
Okay. Whatever happened, the video disappeared for a second as soon as I went live.
Ah.
I don't know why.
Maybe restart it.
There it goes.
I turned it on and off in OBS, and it worked. Anyway, hi everybody! More technical issues. So yes, we're running a little late here today because of a few technical issues, but we theoretically fixed them all. But welcome. Welcome to Discussing Tabletop. It is our episode for June 8th, 2019. I believe we are in episode 115. Joe and I have been doing this for quite a while.
Nice.
Yeah. We just keep chugging
How are
along.
you guys enjoying it after all this time?
It's fun. For a while we had a third host and that was really fun. But now it's sort of been like, we've been much better at getting in contact with a lot of industry folks like yourselves, where like in our early days, we didn't have that kind of thing. We were really dinky then.
Yep.
But anyway, so yeah, joining us today are Marc and Rob of Golden Bell Studios. They're going to be chatting with us about the things that they do over there, and then joining us in the rest of the conversations today, which our topic list for today, after we have our discussion with them and their work, we are going to talk about the Magic the Gathering Netflix series, whatever they're doing over there, the new Mulligan rules for Magic, and then there's a couple of board games release. Wizkids has a new game, Kodachi. Usaopoly has released Astro Trash. And Plaid Cat Games has announced an interesting sounding game, Aftermath, an adventure book game. Let's start, though, with Marc, Rob, the two of you. Why don't we start with the basics? What is Golden Bell Studios?
Ooh, where do we start? Okay, so I'm Marc. Thanks for having us. This other voice is Rob.
Hi everyone, I'm Rob. Yeah, and again, thanks guys for having us on the show and everything. It's pretty cool.
I know it's been a long time coming. We were talking, I think you were talking to Rob since PAX Unplugged.
Yeah.
So it's been a while. Okay, so what is Golden Bell Studios? So Rachel, Rob, and myself, we founded Golden Bell when we were in college, still when we were at the Ohio State University back in 2015. And we pretty much set sights on being able to create a media company that would be able to tell stories, animation, film, and that's kind of all three of our backgrounds. Over that year, we actually had realized that we can't do everything ourselves. Rob and I are writers, Rachel's an artist, and that was kind of like how we started collaborating together. And we were doing that throughout school, writing screenplays, making comics, and then we were looking at how we could essentially grow the company, because we realized very quickly that creators by themselves can't really do anything in the world without some business acumen and being able to scale projects. So Rachel and I also have business degrees. So we had essentially done our first project, Sunday Comics, and we had gathered about 300 artists to create this giant-sized newspaper. First time we had put on Kickstarter, it failed. Second time it was successful, about 6 months later, when we were looking at how we could reposition the market. And from there, we were looking at how we can build a media company. And essentially, the basis of media is the different derivative mediums and merchandise that could be exploited from each piece of intellectual property. So we always had the intention of doing things like games, books, comics, toys, stuffed animals, pretty much you name it. So a lot of people ask, well, where's the focus? And I know you guys were just talking about focus and spreading yourselves too thin. Our focus is interesting because the essence of entertainment, someone had once told me recently, it means everything. And when we wanted to start an entertainment media company, we realized that we weren't starting a game company. We weren't starting a toy or book publishing division. And each of these divisions that we have are essentially their own businesses. And Golden Bell itself is essentially the media branch which houses and creates intellectual property. So that's the overall scope and scale of it. And then we have the individual divisions, I think, that drew you guys, like Golden Games, which is our tabletop gaming division, where we also have party games as well. So not just like tabletop games. So we have a lot of party games, things like that. And that division is essentially independently run from Golden Bell Studios. We have comics that are turned into games from Golden Liberty, and from Polar Press, our book division. We have toys that come from there, like the Valyard Mansion is one of our animations, and books from Zell van der Heffer. And then we have like a toy of Dennis Boyd, the Scottish-speaking rat. So that's kind of like how each division intermingles and intertwines and licenses properties to one another, depending on who's running what.
No, I thought it was a really cool idea that you kind of set this up this way, that you kind of built this, rather than just like the focus, you built like a cross-media thing. You know, you have all these branches that then can work together, and then you can have it that, it's one of those things that I felt like, because it's all under your house, it's a lot better than, let's say, it can be a lot better than, say, someone that licenses something from a TV series or a comic and then does it. You are having, like, these different divisions which are all under your purview doing that.
Yeah, that's essentially pretty much the basis for everything, because we have our licensing division called Golden Licensing, and we work on things like Naruto Shippuden, we have Lost, Once Upon a Time, Avatar Last Airbender, Rugrats. We have like almost 15, 16 licenses from big companies, and it's just a different type of business. It's a different model. The way things are created is very, very different, and it's everything that we've learned over the years of how long things take to create has been extremely important, being able to convey this to people, because oftentimes someone, bless you, that was Rachel.
Bless you.
Yeah, so that's something that we kind of learned over the years of being able to set expectations, because there's a lot of dreamers out there, a lot of people that think it's very easy to make $1 million. And with Unbroken, which is, I'm sure we'll be talking about that, is a lot of people look at that Kickstarter number, that 500,000, and like, wow, you guys killed it. And when the reality is the thing didn't make a profit. So it's things like that being able to set expectations and learning how to set those with people we work with has been very important in how we like further develop and grow the company.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So, that gets me into, now, like, a lot of the media that you put out with, like, the toy lines, the comic lines, you know, things like, maybe, like, animations and stuff, those, like, can make some core sense, even, like, some video games. But,
Yep.
What got you inspired to get into the board gaming section of it, too?
Rob, you want to take that? Because this is kind of Rob's wheelhouse.
Yeah.
He runs a lot of this.
Yeah, so like I'm Rob, and a lot of what I do at the company is, it's a weird kind of job. It's a weird position. It's kind of head of content, so like chief content officer. It's like a fancy way of saying that I'm like a editor-in-chief, or like kind of really instrumental with development, and it's always been one of my favorite parts. I think all of us can attest to that. You guys have a lot of really cool ideas and a lot of content that is either, you know, creating your own stuff or doing stuff with tabletop or D&D. And ever since I was a kid, I personally have always loved like media and big brands and small brands. I'm sure we can always go back and forth about our inspirations. Things like Pokemon. I played a little bit of Magic. I played Yu-Gi-Oh! Not too much role playing. I kind of did a lot of more writerly stuff as I was in school and working with other people. And Marc and I are actually co-writers, so we collaborated together, and Rachel as well. So the three of us started as like a team. And one thing that Marc and I always liked is we really were into creating like just kind of not just stories. We wanted also to create experiences, and we always talked about video games. We used to talk about like video game movies and all that kind of stuff in college. So when we had a natural progression, and it might seem that Golden Bell kind of just jumped into games, but since the beginning, we always knew we were going to do game-like experiences. We knew it was going to be important. We just weren't really sure how. And funnily enough, one of the first games we ever really did work on that's still not published right now is is like a fantasy tabletop role-playing game. So like there's been a lot of different things that we've been focusing on and wanting to do since the beginning. And I think for me in general, I think video games are definitely a bigger inspiration for me, but I still really like tabletop as well, especially if it's the right experience, you know, kind of merging story or world building together with like mechanics.
Well, you actually answered my next question, because I was going to ask if you were, because you've got like a lot of like the board games, party games, if you were going to be doing a tabletop role playing game, and you just like you've been working on one.
Yeah, it's huge, and part of it's Unbroken inspired, but a lot of it is it's different. So we are in like the fantasy realm right now. We have a lot of sci-fi stuff too. A lot of the sci-fi stuff is kind of what Marc and I have been working on in the background. Again, like you can see that we do so much, so it's stuff that we slowly develop. And when we first got together, there was a lot more of the kind of creation ideation. Today, it's more just like executing and making sure we get to those areas where like we can still create. Just the same way when we work with collaborators or partners, we're working on like making sure that like kind of this system of the different divisions of Golden Bell can still coexist and mingle and like just allow people to continue making ideas. So it's been really cool. Like I think that role playing in general, Marc and I have been talking about it a little bit recently, has expanded a lot. Like D&D, I mean, part of this is just part of the business. I mean, Hasbro acquires Wizards of the Coast. Of course, they're going to have the budget to do book after book after book or Adventure League series, but it is cool to see a lot of like, you know, the celebrity culture kind of get in on it. And some people might say sell these things, but I think that when you expand the audience, I think it's cool because it allows, I think, everything to engage holistically. You know, more people get to be experienced to things they wouldn't think they would normally enjoy. But, you know, I think that bridging the gaps is also an important part of what I hope we're trying to do as well.
Cool. And now, I did think of an interesting question here related to your licenses, because you were talking about that. Now, what makes you like lean into the various properties that you have that you've licensed from like outside, things like, as you're saying, like Lost, Once Upon a Time, Avatar and stuff, and what makes you like figure out what your in-house more stuff that you've been developing, kind of like with like Unbroken and like having things related to that too?
I'll do in-house and I'll let Marc do the licenses because he's got a good perspective on the licenses. But in short, with originals, it's mainly going to be kind of a twofold approach. We want to do things that are going to cater for all ages, kind of thing. For a lot of our properties, we love fairy tales. We love like kind of old retro stuff like the Sunday comics. We like big experiences, so that's a big thing for us. And we like physical mediums, even though, you know, obviously there's a lot of things changing with physical print. And it's like you can't really make a lot of money in books, comics. You can't really make any money in it. It's just kind of, you're working on a property that's a labor of love. But in terms of genres and stuff, we also want to expand into the other kinds of stories being told. There isn't necessarily like a strong focus on adult content. I'd say Unbroken is definitely like PG-13 or kind of light R, but we do really want to create something for everyone. And I know a lot of companies want to do that, but like from our perspective, we've tried to balance things out with each member of our team. So, you know, if we do horror, we'll have like obviously like light Goosebumps stuff in the works, or find somebody that has a really cool story to tell in that sphere. And then if we want to do something a little bit harder, like from a Stephen King standpoint, we have those kinds of things. But it's all just planned out with what we think our audience is going to enjoy. Like Rachel's been working on like the Marshmallow story intermittently with all that licensed art she's doing. So the original properties are definitely like a big part of our brand, even though like, again, it's getting to releases and making sure that we get things out on at least a semi-consistent basis along with our licenses. And then Marc can definitely jump into why we've chosen specific things like Lost or Naruto.
Yeah. Okay, so essentially the licenses have been very strategic in how we've chosen which ones we were going to work on. So Lost happens to be the reason why I actually wanted to get involved in the entertainment world in the first place when I had seen the pilot back in 2004, right? I had watched it with my dad, and I was like, yeah, this is definitely what I want to be doing: directing, producing, writing, and kind of a lot of that stuff ballooned from there. And it happened to be coincidence that a Disney agent had came up to us at C2E2 and said, "Do you guys like to work on Lost?" And we're like, I thought it was like a joke. Someone that may have like known that we like Lost, but that's kind of something that we all share. And Rob and I had talked about Lost a lot in school, and we wound up talking with them and negotiating a deal. It took about 6 months. We signed on 8/15. For anyone that's a Lost fan knows that's very relevant to the show. And then from there, we started approaching other licenses. Like Naruto Shippuden is Rachel's favorite show. We had always loved Once, and that was kind of a package deal with Lost. We grew up in the 90s, all of us, so we pretty much all love all the Nickelodeon cartoons. Working on Rugrats and stuff like that has been really cool, all the Splat properties. And then working on SpongeBob, obviously, I think that's just the staple of our generation of what cartoons have become. And we look at projects that have potential to be revitalized in some way, and when we started working on SpongeBob, we had a very good feeling that SpongeBob was going to have some type of soft reboot or something. And then we just saw just a couple of days ago, we've known for a little while about what's going on, but Camp Coral was just announced as a prequel to SpongeBob when he's a kid. So we looked at a lot of nostalgia brands, and that's what's going on top down in Hollywood, being able to look at IP that has developed over the past 20, 30 years, like Magic with the Netflix show, like we were talking a few minutes ago, that builds these brands over the course of half a lifetime, and then they're able to tap into the nostalgia of the people that originally watched it and then their kids. So that's a part of a marketing strategy that we utilized in license and content acquisition.
Cool. Joe, do you have anything quickly before I go into my next one, just to give you,
I did also see you have some Garfield stuff as well, which I thought was a bit of a throwback.
Yes, we do. So Garfield is actually the first comic I'd read when I was a kid. We had been working on it with the Sunday Comics, creating like original Garfield strips. Rich, Rob, and I were making a bunch of comics, and it was supposed to just be a fun passion project. But then it kind of ballooned into like making a Sunday Comics style game where you can like create your own Garfield panels. We have a game called Catstagram, which is essentially like a Garfield cat game, since we have over 100 of the Insta famous like cats. One account that we manage is Lil Bunny Sulu, which has like 400,000 or 500,000 followers. So yeah, definitely like the influencer model and that top-down organic approach is also very important.
Cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. So it sounds like you are working on a lot of things coming on.
Yeah.
So it's like that's why I want to be like, well, what are you working on? Well, a lot of things.
We're working on everything.
Yeah.
So, geez, what are we working like? What's taking up a lot of the time right now is definitely Unbroken. Mm-hmm. That's a huge time sink just because of the shipping debacles. If anyone's followed that, it's a behemoth task for a small team like us on top of everything we're doing. We're not like a fulfillment logistics company. I mean, we only do our own distribution to retail stores because the distributors just take way too much of a cut. There's no way for us to profit, and then if we're cutting off 60%, there's no royalties left for anyone. There's no money to be made.
We have advisors helping us too. So like, Marc's family, and then like there are people that have had experience, so we understand like how difficult it is, and we're wary of the costs, and we understand the amount of work. So we have people like Nikki on our team who's helping me with like the logistics and stuff, and it's getting done. I think that you guys have seen it, or I don't know if you've experienced it personally, but people can get riled up on the comment sections, and it's always going to be something you have to deal with. But in general, like after we get the shipping from Unbroken done, we'll be really happy. We can take a break in a sense, but we'll still we're actually still even working on Unbroken as well, like on expansions and other parts, because again, we, you know, along with the game designer Artem, like he's still really invested in like in the world and in the game and like the system he's definitely like developed alongside us. And then we're also really excited too about like the storytelling potential. So that's still going to be a big project we're going to be working on even after fulfillment. You know, despite like packing 17,000 packages.
Well, why don't we move on and talk about Unbroken, because that seems to be this a big topic here.
Yeah, it is for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty big. Have you guys followed it or seen it on Kickstarter? Do you guys know kind of what the game is?
I've seen a little bit of it. I've read up on it, but I don't know nearly as much as probably you guys would. You know, I try to keep up with as much, like some stuff on Kickstarter, especially ones that you guys got yeah, as you were saying, you got funded by a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unexpected. We thought it was going to make like 30,000.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Definitely not. I guess like you want me to just give them like the sort of just general.
Sure. Yeah. Go.
Yeah, Unbroken is a solo fantasy game. It's kind of a game of dark fantasy and revenge, survival and revenge, where you play one of various different character classes, and characters are double-sided, so you can choose your gender, and you're trying to survive in this dark dungeon after you've been ambushed. So it's really thematic. It's pretty quick. It's a solitaire game, so it's solo only focused, and since you're alone in the game, you're really experiencing like a lot of the perils and a lot of the stuff around you. It kind of hits you hard. It's a kind of grim dark fantasy mixed with a little bit of horror elements as well. And each monster just gets more and more difficult. You fight 4 different monsters, four levels if you make it through the game if you win. And there are 6 monsters per level, so there's going to be 24 monsters you have the chance to fight. They inflict terrible conditions on you, and the resource management is really tight, where you kind of have to make sure that you're making the right trades. So if you ever do lose in the game, if you lose in level 3 or level 4 even, you can kind of go back, reshuffle everything, and kind of discover where it is you made a mistake and just do better in the future of the game depending on your character class. And what we thought was really cool that Marc and I had developed, I think Marc had the initial idea, was that we have flavor text in the game, and in the encounter cards we have like instructions where you don't shuffle the cards and you experience the story in like order. So for your first playthrough you could theoretically just read through the game and experience like this sort of grimdark fantasy that we've developed on the side. And a lot of the campaign had this element too, where people could follow along with monster stories and a lot of the other like character stories, and they got to experience the sort of grim dark world. So I mean, we've obviously been inspired by a lot of different fantasy stories out there, from Lord of the Rings to Game of Thrones, and even to Joe Abercrombie's First Law trilogy. So there's been a couple of things that we've had on our radar, and it was just a cool campaign to be a part of, and it was a great experience. We've had a lot of good feedback too from reviewers. I think we got an award for one of the best tabletop games from like the Tentacleade Award, and then we also have a nomination for South by Southwest like best gamer's voice tabletop game, which was cool, back in Austin, Texas. So it's been a journey, and it's still going to continue from here.
Cool. That comes to mind because I don't think either of us have really had a chance to talk to anybody that has had as a successful Kickstarter as you have had. Like, what does that like mean for you? For like, what is that? How does that affect the entire game you're designing? You know, because yeah, I was looking through the campaign again and seeing how you have a lot of stretch goals and stuff that you ended up putting out. But like, you know, how does that affect, you know, producing it too, to get like a much larger influx than you were expecting?
Yeah, so this is something I think when you ask what is Golden Bell, this is something that I think a lot of people don't understand about our business, and I think a lot of how media companies run. So I'll kind of backtrack a little bit, but like get to your questions. Mm-hmm. So essentially, like the way media companies work is there is a degree of autonomy from like showrunners or producers in film. And in games, designers often have a lot of leeway to be able to build something that they envision. And Artem is the game designer of Unbroken, while Rob and I are the writers and who are the publishers of the game. We are not the one that are making the actual like game mechanics. We're not the ones playtesting. We're the ones editing the game. And we do a lot of development in terms of like what is Unbroken. So Unbroken, people may say, oh, it's a tabletop game, but Unbroken is a piece of intellectual property that exists. It's a world in and of itself. It's like, look at Elder Scrolls or Skyrim. It's a world that exists, and some people can play in their own world. There's sandboxes, and people can create in it. So when we work with designers like Artem, there's a degree of leeway where we give suggestions on what to do. And when he had made the campaign by himself at first, he had set up like some shipping prices, and then we came on a couple weeks in. I think it was like about 2 weeks in, because the campaign started getting very big. I think it was at about 150,000 at that point. So a little bit around halfway where it ended up is when we became very involved with it. At that point, some of the stretch goals that he had promised people were things, some of them were not achievable. Things like, from a manufacturing side, the custom pieces for the tracker, because you can't make those pieces that small. And then the whole tracker would have to be bigger. It would increase the box size, the shipping weight. And then there are things that were very hard to estimate on his end, and it's something that we're seeing like kind of the brute end of the stick on it, where he had originally the $4 shipping price would have made sense because the game was very light prior to the stretch goal. But then once all these stretch goals were met, it increased the weight of the game by a lot. And things like the double layered tracker tokens were originally just cardstock. It was nothing. So what happens is those are mistakes that kind of went by, and it's no one's fault really. We say these are just honest mistakes that happen. So when we became more involved, we started course correcting a lot of things. We took about 6 months on editorial, additional development, flavor text writing. John is our in-house composer. He works with us on everything and 3D modeling stuff, and he's been working on the score for Unbroken, which just finished. So when some of these stretch goals are planned out, I think people can say, oh, these are the capabilities that we have, or these are things that we'd like to see. And sometimes they're not accounted for properly. And that's where in the past, I'd say year, we've taken a very different approach, where we created a 100-page document. We call it our secret sauce, like, of how to make money. And it's things of like what not to do. And these things are like not checking on pricing and weight before you have like a stretch goal even announced is something very important. So kind of that's where things can look like they're very, very successful, and people can get caught up in like, oh my God, this is going to hit another 50,000. This is going to hit another stretch goal. But sometimes the weight and the cost of each of those things are not properly accounted for, and that's where you can have these screw-ups, for better English.
Yeah, so because you were saying how I guess it seems more successful than it is what.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
it's in the red, to be honest. Probably $75,000 to $100,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And I like
it's
so interesting. Yeah, it's a lot of money. And it's funny because I've read some really nasty comments, and like sometimes all of us like share the Facebook accounts and the Kickstarter, and we just all joke around with people, and some people really don't like it. Because I've read people are like, oh well, they should this should be their mistake that they pay for. But in reality, like if we weren't a company that had like a plethora of other businesses, this game would never have been delivered. It wouldn't have been manufactured because there wouldn't have been enough money. So
right.
that type of risk that we take because we believe in the brand and the growth of what Unbroken can be is kind of why we're still here and why we're able to push through to delivery.
Mm-hmm. With the hope that maybe like post Kickstarter sales will help make up some of that too.
Yes and no.
Okay.
I mean, we didn't have a huge amount of money allocated to be able to like produce an extra 10,000 units.
Mm-hmm.
So it's end of the day, we'll be fine. The game is going to get delivered, and everyone's going to love the game. But I think really where the future of Unbroken becoming profitable will be is that people on the next campaign, people actually pay like real shipping costs, not like $3 shipping because they're used to the free shipping on Amazon. And it's like if we do lose those customers on Kickstarter and they still want the game, then they can get it in retail or on Amazon a year later.
It's really saturated state of the industry wise. So it's I know a lot of people sometimes, I don't know how many people you talk to about like what retail is, and you can find some success with brick and mortar retail, but a lot of what's happening now with the hobby industry in general is just that it's a little bit guarded. It's close to the chest for a lot of people, but it's kind of, there's sometimes we just say this saying, we have like a joke internally. It's like you can't just make a game. Like you make a game and then you release it, and okay, what's your post Kickstarter life? And I think a lot of people out there are like, oh well, it can just sell. You can put it on a shelf, or like think about Gloomhaven. And I went to GAMA for the last 2 years. I go to the conventions, I go to trade shows for consumers and both the business, and not everything can be that like flash in the pan success. And even if you guys are familiar with Gloomhaven, you have their spin-off Founders of Gloomhaven. It's a slower city building kind of a Euro. That game doesn't really sell. I go to retailers a lot, and like I sell them games direct, and I talk to a lot of business owners that are selling direct to consumer that have these products out. And just because it says Gloomhaven on it doesn't mean that it's going to be nearly as successful. So to build a brand, I mean, in short, it takes time. You kind of have to. You can't expect that, because it did so well on Kickstarter, that same exact thing will really translate in the retail space. I'm not saying that,
right.
It's going to be all doom and gloom, no pun intended there. But like just in general, like just taking like a long set approach and understanding that we are doing it because a lot of the reason why you have to do these things, and I guess you guys know this too, it's just we have fun with it. We still at the end of the day enjoy a lot of what we're doing. Some of it can be like crazy or stressful, or you're getting ready to travel a lot. There's a lot of hours that you put into it, but at the end of the day, we're still playing games. We're still making stuffed animals. We're still having a lot of fun with a lot of the people we work with and a lot of the customers we meet along the way too.
Now, that brings me to a question, because it's I do tend to try to talk a lot about Kickstarters because it's a good way for various companies to use it to get products out. But that comes to the question is, how do you see using Kickstarter? Because I'm curious about this, because you have had like Unbroken, which is like the example of both success and failure at it, and at the same time, actually, technically.
Yeah, it's so. I guess clarify kind of your question. I want to make sure I hit it properly.
Okay. I do see a lot of people and companies using Kickstarter, and me and Joe, we talk about a lot of them, and then we do talk about sometimes that we see various companies that use Kickstarter, and it's like, did you really need to use Kickstarter for this? But then again, you guys are much bigger into that. The consumer side of things, and like understanding a lot of that, that business side that perhaps like we don't recognize. So that maybe like when a larger company like Steve Jackson Games puts something up on Kickstarter, why would they do that?
That's a great. Oh my God! I was literally going to talk about Shenmue. Okay, that's actually one of the best questions I've been asked probably in all the years that we've done interviews. Because it's actually why. It's the model that we use, and working with these huge companies, we've learned a lot of the ins and outs of why big companies do this. Some of it is kind of like an unspoken truth in the financial world, so that's part of my background in business. It's finance. So I'll go into a little bit, and if you guys have like any questions about like the lingo, just like cut me off. So essentially, I'll use Sony as a good example because we work with them on Superbad, and they had Shenmue, a video game. They had that unveiled at the E3 press conference of 2015, and during that press conference, I forgot his name. I think Jack. He is the CEO of Sony at the time, Sony Computer. And he said, go check out the Kickstarter. Let's see if there's interest in it. So the campaign wound up making millions of dollars. The game still has not delivered. It's 4 years late. And a lot of people are like, you said it was going to be delivered next year. What happened? And what happened was big companies are starting to use Kickstarter because of cash flow constraints. It's a huge financial risk to be developing Shenmue not knowing if there's an audience that still exists for something. It's the reason why there's pre-orders for video games from Nintendo a year out, or Final Fantasy VII, that they had those pre-orders, and then they're like, okay, there's a huge interest. We got to do the remake for it, and we're going to spend 10 years and $100 million doing it. What happens is, since the credit crisis of 2008, a lot of people say it was a real estate crisis. What happened was the credit of the big companies was damaged. So you'll start to see now, if you look at like balance sheets of these Fortune 500 companies, that they have a huge amount of cash on hand compared to their PE ratio and really what their market cap is. And the reason that changed is because lenders, factors, they were no longer as comfortable investing in things that were somewhat risky. They wanted sure things. Film financiers started going more into the Marvel films, into the big budget films, rather than the mid-tier, kind of the mid-cap films. So indie films have risen in these past 10 years, but those mid-tier films are almost all but dead. So the reason I use film as an example is because a lot of these big companies, like Hasbro, are the ones that are driving this change in how finance impacts cash flow for development. So you'll start seeing, like, you have your My Little Pony, you have your, you have your Magic on Netflix, you have Transformers, which are toys. And when investors are not comfortable with giving their money on things that are not surefire, you're going to start seeing the shift in crowdfunding. Now, not necessarily Kickstarter, because that's something I do not like to use. But the crowdfunding aspect will change over the next 15 to 20 years, where you will rarely see something develop that is a big thing unless there is financial interest from consumers. And you're starting to see that with Indiegogo buying micro ventures and people starting to have stakes in these enterprises. So how we feel about it is, I mean, it's just like kind of it is what it is. There's no way around it. There's so many things that caused this to happen over the past 15 years when Greenspan was kind of dealing with all of the financial impacts of our country. And then a lot of people say, like, how do these things connect? How do they relate? And in the financial world, everything kind of goes through credit. Our country is built on credit. We have credit scores, we have mortgages, we have cars. We buy things on credit card. And then when you start to see this has evolved over the past 20 years to start impacting smaller projects, things that we now consume as entertainment rather than a house. These elastic and inelastic goods have started to shift into what is necessary and what is just something for fun. And that's kind of why these big companies are starting to use these crowdfunding sites like Kickstarter. They're making sure there's interest, and they're easing their investors' confidence and boosting it to make sure that this is worth the time and money we're going to put into this. I hope that kind of answered it.
Actually, that does really well, because that was something that we always talked about, like whenever we would see, like, again, using the example of it, Steve Jackson Games putting up a Kickstarter, like, half of them were like, okay, we get that. That's, like, an odd property. But there's other ones that were like, well, that doesn't seem like a property that would fail. Why are they putting it up here? But then when you're saying, like, it's helping with investors who are getting some of the other funding on the other side, and, you know, maybe it's not just because, yes, this property might succeed, but we want to make sure it seems like it's going to succeed.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, you also see things like Hunger Games on Kickstarter, and it failed. Look, now there are reasons why big projects do fail. Not knowing your audience and sometimes having subpar products. Not saying Hunger Games, the game was subpar. I have no opinion on it. But it's being able to, like, see that you'll have your wild successes, and then you'll have your failures. You'll have your things like what happened with Space Goat, and I think the Terminator Evil Dead franchise. And there's a lot to that. I mean, there's more than meets the eye in some of these things where people say, oh, like, we got scammed, or they stole the money. Sometimes people really don't steal the money. Sometimes they did under budget and they just weren't able to dig themselves out of a hole. So we're kind of fortunate in that aspect where we were able to say, oh, well, we can allocate X amount of company funds due to a profit in something else on our ends, and that's how we're able to continue. And these big companies don't necessarily operate that way because each property is its own LLC. It's its own company. So everything is very contained. If you see like a Marvel movie, Avengers, the new movie Endgame LLC, because they have specific investors and producers that are not necessarily investing in all of Disney or all of Marvel, but they're putting money into that one project. And that's been going on with games, I believe, since the early 90s when Hasbro kind of started growing their media franchise outside of just like Uno or Monopoly. And when they acquired things like Wizard of the Coast, like Rob was talking about, it changed a lot of the landscape of how people view toys, and it became a very cutthroat, very serious industry. Gund has been around for 100 years on the toyscape, and it's just it's a shill industry. It's very quote-unquote professional, but it's not the professional that people think. And I've talked a lot on comments like about customer service and people like being real people. And I think that's often like it escapes a lot of people when you see things like the Shenmue, where there are companies that just sometimes don't even respond to rumors, or they don't cater to each customer, because this mentality that the customer is always right will not work in crowdfunding, because you can't have one person responding to millions of people as something grows. And that's going to be where I believe PR changes, where it's not going to be the customer's right. If the customer is an asshole, they're going to be told, essentially, like, get out of here. And Apple kind of has been the leading front on that in the past 20 years, where they say, if you don't like our products, you can go buy an Android. And some people love them, some people hate them for it. But I think they saw a future of how pre-orders would impact essentially all entertainment products.
Cool. Joe, do you have any more questions? Because I think I've got one more question I kind of want to ask.
Not off the top of my head, so go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, kind of, because I think that hits on a lot of that hits on a lot of things for me, and I'm really happy that I was able, as much as I'm happy that I got you guys on to talk about, the stuff you do, that conversation there was one of my favorites in a while, just because that's looking into something that we talk about here that I didn't know about, so I'm happy with that.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. I mean, not a lot of people know, and we're gonna actually do a day-long podcast. I was talking with Artem, where we're gonna talk about like a lot of this stuff in more detail and kind of the channels of how mistakes can happen in order to like help the community and other designers or toy makers or whatever be able to see the pitfalls that we've been able to see, because we feel that being able to educate people on the creative side with some more business acumen will actually help translate to consumers who are like, why are you doing it this way? When that is essentially like, there's only a few certain ways you can do things correctly, and a lot of people just make the same mistakes over and over and over again.
You need to know at least something on the business side, even if you're the creator of these things.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I think one thing I joke about with Rachel's dad often, he's a doctor, and my dad's been in business for 30 years, is that people respect lawyers and doctors to a very different degree that they respect business people. And this is part of because of the gig economy, where everyone's like, I can be my own boss. And what you learn in business school is something that is just not kind of in the same echelon of respect as a lot of graduate programs, even though graduate programs for business exist. And I think being able to reorient how the public perceives business is not just bad people, because that did happen after 2008. A lot of people started to hate business owners. And it's not that every business is evil and does things to spite you and they're secretive, but that's something I've seen a byproduct over the past 10 or so years, where business people are just all looked at as essentially scumbags. And it's something that I've struggled with not understanding why that is, but essentially that's why we want to be able to introduce that to this community of writers, designers, artists, things like that.
Yeah. So, cool. My final question, though, would be getting back to the things that you guys do. What upcoming thing would you most want to shout out now that for people to keep an eye out for?
I don't even know. What's your favorite?
Um,
what are you
play
most
favorites
looking for coming out?
I really do want. I think I want to just talk about. I guess it's really gonna have to be Lost, and I know that's gonna be kind of just pimping out a license for a second, but there's a couple of things we can talk about, like that I'm excited about as things get closer. I mean, we'll be at Origins, we'll be at Gen Con. Origins will just be like at a demo table, really just playing games. So if people just want to stop by and learn how to play any of the things we do or talk about something on the future, that'll be really fun. But with Lost, we're doing some deduction games, and you guys like games like Werewolf, or if you like Resistance or Coup, we've been inspired by like all those games. So we've got a couple cool island deduction games, and then there's going to be a stuffed animal of the smoke monster, and it's going to actually make the noise, so you can actually press the button and it goes like ticka ticka. So we're really thrilled to just be doing this. I mean, like it's my favorite show of all time too, and regardless of what people say about the ending, I personally loved it. So I'm excited for Lost.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool.
Yeah.
And I guess for me, I look at things always from like a very long-term perspective. And what's that? Rachel's saying SpongeBob meme game. That we think is going to be really big. That's 20 years in the making, essentially. But for me, we've been working on an animation called The Valued Mansion. It's the book I mentioned earlier, and that we've been doing for 3 years as of yesterday. So that's something that you can see it on Instagram. It's at The Valued Mansion. It's one of our probably favorite projects. Rachel and I are directing the animated trailer, and the book is really phenomenal. Zell did a fantastic job with it. So, yeah, I mean, there's honestly, we could sit here for probably a day and tell you the next 15 years of what we have in the pipeline. I wouldn't even know where to start of like what's my favorite.
Wow. Yeah, jeez. Okay, so I think it's probably best right now to kind of say like just keep an eye on everything you're doing, because it sounds like you're doing a lot of cool things.
Yeah, just follow Golden Bell Studios. I mean, we're not as active on social media. That's the only guilty thing we have. But we do try to post on the Facebook Golden Bell Studios and Instagram. If you follow RachelCorson.art, she sometimes posts like in her stories things that we're doing, and our puppies.
Yeah, she's really good to follow. A lot of cute puppies.
I saw the King Charles Spaniel. Yeah.
Yes, and we just got Lucky's half sister a couple days ago. So, cool. She's a handful.
Joe, you have anything to finish it off, or I think I'm good if we move on to the next topic.
No, I think we're good to move on. I think everything I kept like stuff I had written down was answered before I got to ask. So
I am sorry.
Oh, it's fine.
I apologize.
It's fine. It happens all the time.
I'm very good at doing this. Is like getting the questions before he can ask them. He gets a couple that I don't get, which is good. You know.
You guys gotta split the list a little bit. Maybe give back a bit. Sharing is caring.
Yes, we probably should brainstorm a little bit of the list of things to ask. But anyway, all right.
Yeah.
No, we do have some news stories that we want to handle, and I wanna first talk about the Magic the Gathering Netflix property they're doing. This is something that I think I was never thinking would happen.
Really?
Well, it's like Magic's been out for so long now,
Yeah.
I didn't see them actually jumping into a property like this or something. Like they do novels, they've done comics, but like I would have felt they would have done it before now.
That's so funny. We talked about we literally were talking about this 2 nights ago, right? I think it was in Alex's room.
I expected it at some point, but yeah, I guess I think that you guys would probably know a lot more because you've done like videos covering the lore. Yeah. It's going to be animated. Is it going to be 3D? Like, are they going like full out? Like, what's?
You think? It's probably. My guess is going to be like Castlevania.
Maybe. What have you guys seen about it?
There's only been a little bit of information so far because the announcement's been so rapidly. I know that the Russos are working with it. I think they are producers. That Bad Robot is working on it, so that's J.J. Abrams. I think.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. These are people that's who you want running it. You have Bad Robot.
I think it's Bad Robot. Let me check here just to make sure.
I mean, look, it's like I talk about this all the time. You asked me why it didn't happen sooner. Brian Burke, he is like really one of the brain children. He's one of the co-founders of Bad Robot. Him and JJ have been working together, and he often doesn't get a lot of credit because he's not on the creative side. I think he only wrote 1 episode of Fringe. He only wrote 1 episode of Fringe from my memory. But he essentially runs Bad Robot's business. And the reason JJ is JJ today is not just because he's a brilliant director, and he's one of my favorites, but it's that he really has one of the smartest guys in Hollywood running the production company. And being able to see things like Magic come about, I'm not surprised. It goes back to what I was saying about how these brands take 20, 30 years to it be ingrained into the public consciousness where people are like, oh, I know Magic. And now it's where I think it's going to be the difference of why some projects wind up failing, because they focus too much on going into the specific audience that they're targeting and not thinking about a mass market movie. Kind of like what happened with World of Warcraft. It just didn't hit the masses well. And I think that's what we're going to see with Magic, where they're probably going to have a movie that's very, very mainstream, just from the Russo brothers and Bad Robot. And then you will also see things that are like catered to the fans, but they're trying to cast a much wider net than just like Magic players. Is my guess. It's my guess.
Yeah, it seems like they're aiming for a series rather than a movie, but we love to see how it evolves. Yeah. And they listed a few people working on it, and the people are like, I don't know any of them, but it's like they say like what they've worked on. You know, well, names are one of my worst recognition things, so I'm just going to put that there. So, like, they give a list of names of the stuff they've worked on, and I'm like, that seems like a cool list of people to work on. I think it's something I will like to see, is what I will say, because, you know, I feel like it could very well expand the lore, and as, you know, I'm a big fan of the lore of these cards that they've managed to build with just cards, and some books and comics occasionally. I think I agree with you that, like, they're going to try to aim for a larger audience, but I don't know if they will succeed or not, because when you mentioned Warcraft, that did remind me that I remember someone was talking about the movie, and I did end up seeing the movie myself, and I could recognize that they played it as a movie that you needed to know something for.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the wrong approach. Look, Duncan Jones, brilliant director. I mean, these guys are great teams. It's just that I think that the reason video games have had a very hard time translating to new audiences the way comic books have done very successfully is that comic books, first of all, they're all owned by these major media conglomerates, and games are often like studios, and then it's a licensing deal, so it's not necessarily in-house, and there's approvals that have to be done. And it's like the Uncharted movie that's coming out with Tom Holland. I'm a mega Uncharted fan. Like, I've been a big fan of Naughty Dog since Crash Bandicoot days, but when I saw that they're doing a prequel of Uncharted, I'm like, why? Like, I text one of the directors of Sony that we talk with. I'm like, why would you guys do a prequel to Uncharted, you're alienating so much. And essentially, like, what I just see what's happening in Hollywood is that it's cash grabs on actors. It's being able to be like, oh, we're going to do something different in the story, possibly because Naughty Dog is like, no, we don't want this. We don't want that type of story told. We don't want the first game being retold. And I think when Mark Wahlberg was attached with De Niro as Drake and Sully, I was like, oh, that makes sense. That's a really good casting. But with this, I don't know. We'll see what happens. I just think games are much harder to translate than comics for many, many reasons that I think it's going to take some very smart people to overcome. But I think that they're doing the animated series for Magic. I think we'll see something like Castlevania. Like Fred Cyber is behind Castlevania, and he was the president of Nickelodeon for years. I sat down with him a few years ago, and we were talking about kind of the future of animation and how these big shows will be adapted, because he's also been trying to get Samurai Jack off the ground for a long, long time, and he finally did it. So I think you just need the right people at the right time to be able to do it, and I think Fred and Naughty Dog, Bad Robot are like those type of people to do it.
Yeah, and I think, like, because it sounds like they want to do definitely more ensemble casting, because it's sort of like when you cast a wide net for something like this, when you look at like card sets, there's lots of like all the legendary characters and all the people they talk about, and I guess that's why like tasking the Roosters, even if they're just like in the production side of things rather than directing side, that's not a bad thing, because they did a really good job with big ensemble things. So their input's probably a pretty good idea on this one. I'm just curious to find more information. I guess that's where I'm going to be, like, if they're going to use anything existing, if they're going to do stuff originally on their own, because, hey, there's definitely been some stuff that other, like, I think one of the Magic video games created stuff on its own, and it worked out pretty well. I think, like, one of the original ones created Chandelar, and people like Chandelar as a plane.
Yeah.
You know, so it could work if they make something on their own, too. So.
Yeah, I mean, you have someone show running like Yoriaki Mochizuki. I think that's how you say his name. The guy that did Into the Spider-Verse from Spider-Man. They're putting together these just like all-star AAA teams that really know what they're doing.
What would you guys are fans? What would you guys really? What would you guys do with the property? Where would you think they should? They should focus on.
For me, what I would do is I would hit both close to home and far from home. I would do a series set in Dominaria, but I would do it post everything that's been put out and just do like your own little corner of it that you can kind of like when you're diving into any kind of fantasy world, you let the, you know, like when they started out Game of Thrones, they had a rich history, they got to show it to you through the thing. Just do that. It's got a rich history, show it to you through the stuff, and then you can kind of add in the characters. I think I personally would go for that because, you know, that's the Magic fans would recognize that and like that, and you could easily, because it is a big world with a lot of, like, established things, you could create your own versions of it for the animated series that people might like anyway, you know, that newcomers might like and introduce to it. But
yeah, I mean, I agree. Game of Thrones is really a great example because, like, I do think that it's just going to be a massive epic. I mean, you have a big thing with animation is also having like a great animation studio behind it. I believe that the people doing it are the Rick and Morty Dragon Prince animators, from my memory, because I had read about it.
Yeah, I just read that.
I think it's Bardell.
There's a lot of information here that's hard. Trying to figure this all out because, like, yeah, I think you're right.
So yeah, you're gonna see cool stuff. I mean, I think the stories are there, like you say. It's about it's kind of what I was saying, like how we have like a 10-15 year plan. It's these guys got to know where they're going. And I think that's why they brought in the Russo brothers. Like these guys, they know what's happening with Avengers. Like they hadn't, no pun intended, they had an end game. They knew they knew where they were going, and Feige obviously is a huge part of this, and Perlmutter. But these guys knew where they were going. They were hoping with Iron Man that this could work, and lo and behold, 15 years later, they have several multi-billion-dollar franchises that change the industry. And I think Magic has that potential because of the vast scope of it. It's just the question is if it's scalable.
Yeah, I have to show him the War of the Spark trailer. He hasn't seen it yet.
Greg Weissman's?
Yeah, did you see that War of the Spark trailer?
Yeah.
It's so, like the potential, again, like I've never been really invested in the lore. I've only recently been looking into it, but they have a lot to mine right now. They can make pretty much whatever they want with that.
Yeah, if it's done properly, it's going to be a multi-billion-dollar franchise that is on air for 5-6 seasons at minimum.
Yeah.
See, I could see them easily doing like maybe a different plane a season.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, I would
the anthology route.
Yeah. They do different planeswalkers. They would just do different.
See, the only issue I could ever see with that is with animation. Anthologies have never worked well with animation. At the same time, though, who would have known that Black Mirror and Twilight Zone would be made as anthologies in American Horror Stories? So I'm not saying it's not possible. I just think for them...
They might do the Netflix, the Marvel route, where they show each perspective of each race.
And then all connect together.
And then they do a Defenders season.
Yeah. They could do that. Do that.
Like a team up.
Yeah, no, you're right that they actually definitely could do that. It's just thinking about minimizing risk of what they're doing. It's going to be fascinating to kind of see, because now that you know what Magic is, you're going to see you're going to see Yu-Gi-Oh! Probably rebooted. There's going to be so much. There's just these massive audiences. I mean, look, Pokemon's been around for what, 25 years?
Hey, technically speaking, they probably are still doing Pokemon anime.
They are. They are.
And occasionally I do see, because I do actually follow some anime, occasionally I do see they do a next Yu-Gi-Oh! Spinoff 27B, but maybe they would reboot the original at this one too. Yeah, like the one that people remember the most.
Yeah.
That's a good point. But cool.
Yeah, it's anime is a different beast. I mean, Castlevania is essentially like an Americanized anime. It's
that one is just something that I'm quite impressed with. That it was kind of left fieldy for me seeing them doing that.
Okay.
So, I didn't know that Netflix was getting into that kind of thing, because I did see another anime that they funded, and I ended up seeing, which I liked a lot.
Which one?
Violet Evergarden.
Okay, so this is actually really interesting. I'm going to blow your mind right now. Mm-hmm. So when you see Netflix original series on the animes like Seven Deadly Sins, it's not their series. It's actually, they just have the distribution rights for like Seven Deadly Sins, and I think Violet Evergarden's like one. I think it's one of them. I'm pretty sure. But their investment in original content that they own, things like House of Cards, Castlevania, that's like few and far between. Most of their stuff, when they say Netflix original, it just means it's exclusive to them and it's not on like Cartoon Network or anything. It's really, really interesting. Like, kind of now that Disney bought Hulu, which I have no comment on publicly about this, is it's going to really change the way streaming and content is generated from companies like Netflix, because they're going to now have to take massive risks when Disney essentially owns Universal Studios library till 2024.
Yep.
So it's crazy stuff. Again, it's a very long-term thing.
Yeah, no, Disney is setting themselves up well with all the things they've done. They definitely... I have no idea what's going to come up their entire streaming service. I'm just going to see, and we'll have to see. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty wild. I cannot believe what's happening is happening. It's back at school. I remember Rachel had done an essay on Apple and a case study on Apple and Disney, and she was saying that Apple would create a competitor to the Cintiq. They'd make essentially what the iPad Pro is for artists. And like she got like I think a D in the paper because the professor's like, they would never do that. It's too small of a market. But now you see the iPad Pro is just huge for artists. And I think the same thing is happening with Disney, where I was wrong, where I'm like, I thought that Disney was going to get bought out. I thought they were positioning themselves to be acquired by a company like Apple. And I don't think they really knew that all these things were going to make billions of dollars. I don't think anyone knew Frozen would make $1 billion. I knew obviously they thought it would make money, but like when they're having movie after movie make $1 billion, it just seems like no one can predict that. It's just nearly impossible.
Yep. So, definitely the Netflix Magic series is something we're gonna have to all keep an eye out on for, and hope to get some more information on soon. You know, we're probably not gonna. I'm guessing it's gonna be at least a year before we see anything on it. With the announcement here, it's hard to say how far along they actually are. That's a very good question that we don't know yet. You know, I did see something that like recently they were saying that animation. Usually when you get an announcement like that, it's years in the making. Very rarely is it like any closer than that. We'll see.
Yeah, it's tough to say. I'm not sure. I'm sure that they've had this deal at least for a year or two. That would be my guess.
Yeah. So let's talk about something a little less, well, Netflixy. They changed something in Magic, or they're going to change something in Magic.
They have, because they have added it to Arena already.
Well, officially in the rules, it's not coming out until July. In the core rules, 2020.
Right, but they have added it to Arena already.
Which is the London Mulligan, as they call it. Which, God, I didn't know these had names. I didn't.
I didn't know there was so many different ones.
I knew there was, like, the original way of doing it, and then the way that, then, like, a second one. But I didn't know there was, like, a couple others. I missed them in the rules, technically speaking. But this one, effectively, the Mulligan is... rather than just you draw 7 cards, and if you mulligan, you draw 1 less, which has been like the staple that I've known about for a long time here, and you keep drawing less. It's you draw the same number, you draw 7, or whatever your hand size to start out is supposed to be, but you put a number of your choice on the bottom of your library, down to that number that you mulligan down.
Yeah, how many? So if you mulliganed once, you would discard 1, and you'd have a hand of 6.
But you don't. It's like it's putting it on the bottom of your lilibrary too.
Right.
You
You
know?
you put it on the bottom of your library. It threw me the hell off the first time that happened. Because I'm like, why am I discarding why am I putting a card on the bottom of my library? I haven't heard of this before.
No, they were talking about how they were experimenting with it on Arena and online, and Wizards has actually gone into a lot of details about like analyzing it for all their formats too, which I'm actually kind of surprised. Like, I knew they would probably weigh the rules a lot, but they actually thought more on this than just for all the different major formats. Because normally they're very standard heavy in their looks, and they ignore things like they might keep a bit on modern, and they completely ignore vintage and legacy. But even them, they're like, yeah, we tested it out for those too. It's like, really?
Well, it does make sense why they're saying they're doing it. That it'll help when it'll help stop non-games happening.
Yeah.
So you're not you don't constantly get stuck with a horrible hand.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that can happen. That the cards just aren't shuffled right, that and you get no land, 1 land, 2, you can't, and you keep mulliganing, and then end up with nothing. With drawing 7 cards and then discarding down, you're more likely to get a mulligan that has what you can keep keep a playable hand in.
Yeah, you can keep working on it.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, I think, a good idea, and I guess what they're saying is the downsides they see is people mulliganing more often. Because I guess that's an option now. Because I don't know if there's actually like, before it's like, you mulligan because there's no land, all land kind of things. It seemed to evolve, like, from my experience, to mulliganing if you have a non-working hand. And maybe now, do you have to announce why you're mulliganing? Would you just announce that, like, oh, I'm going to mulligan, just to fish for a better hand?
Right. And you might get it, you might not still, but, you have a slightly better chance than with the old Mulligan rules.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I would like to test it out to see how.
You also can Mulligan down to you have 0 cards, which would be kind of pointless, I would think, because at that point it's like, okay, I'm going to draw 7 cards and put them all on the bottom of my library.
Yeah. I play and draw it. Play and draw it. It's what I get.
Yeah.
So no. Yeah. This is an interesting change, definitely. I don't know why it's called London. Maybe because that's where they tested it out first. It sounds like they tested it out at the Mythic Championships 2. So I think that was in London. I can't remember. It says it's in London. Okay. So that's why it's the London Mulligan rule.
Right.
So I guess the other ones, the Paris one and the Vancouver, which is the one they've been using, they tested out there.
That's what it sounds like.
Jeez. Yeah. So, I'd say for people out there who play Magic, test out yourselves. That's definitely what I can say. Anybody else have any kind of more input on this one or want to join in the conversation?
I've heard the London Mulligan term being used for lots of different card games. But yeah, for me, I don't see, not that I'm a very avid player at all, really, but I don't really see I don't have too many problems with Mulligan, and I guess that's their way of, if you draw one less card, that's their way of like kind of making sure people don't abuse it. Like you guys are saying, like if you go to 0 cards, no one's going to really want to put themselves at that disadvantage or to have only like a couple cards in their hands. Maybe some people will build a couple meme or crazy decks that could use that type of strategy, but I think for the most part it should be fine. You'd still have to build up some kind of resource in order to, activate and use different creatures, so I think it's going to be fine. But I mean, we'll see how much controversy it does end up causing. I don't know how it's going to affect things like tournament in the future.
Yeah, because when you think about it, it is technically a huge rules change. It really is, because the nature of the Mulligan was to be like, if you draw the really awful hand that you can't play with, you have a chance of getting something better. Now it's a lot easier.
Well, and the other big change is the fact that instead of drawing one less, you're drawing a whole hand and then taking out what you don't want.
Yeah, customizing it.
Yeah, so you're getting, with that, you get a shot when you're Mulligan to get a better hand than you might have with the old Mulligan rule.
So
because you have one or more cards more that you can look at. So
yeah, so I guess with the tests, they've seen that it seems like it's good for the most the like 5-6 commons like formats. I'm curious. I don't know if they've tested it out for things like Commander or not, or some of the more unusual formats, but at least the core ones, it looks good for it. So hey, test it out. It's officially in the rules though when the pre-release of 2020 comes out on July 5th. So that's technically when all official play will be using it. So.
All right.
I do want to talk about a few board games before we go. Let's see here. I want to talk about Kodachi. That was an interesting little game that Wizkids is throwing out here, and I wanted to talk about it because I like the idea of it. I have to say this. I keep saying it about Wizkids. I do like their, I guess the what's the word I'm looking for? I'm brain dumping it.
I'm not sure.
Flavor they put to a lot of things, at least. They do keep things simple though. This one, it's basically like, yeah, they say samurai, but I think it makes me feel more like, maybe like Ronin or ninja. I'm gonna complain about that. Anyway, you're beating people to get stuff, either through strength or stealth. which you have cards. Higher cards beat strength, lower cards do stealth. Getting through guards, you get stuff, and it's getting the most stuff. So, simple game. Like quicker play. It seems like an interesting concept for just a high-low game almost, maybe, where you are, betting that your hand will go against this thing and I'll need high or I will need low. Like, when do you use the number you have? When do you save it?
Right.
So, I don't know if there's anything else I wanted to throw about this one, because I do want to, I don't want to have the show go on too long. I just wanted to mostly give it a shout out. Joe, you have anything else?
No, not on this one.
Okay. Rob, Mark, I don't know if you want to give anything on this one, the idea of the format here.
I have nothing.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I think I'm good.
Okay.
Yep.
So, I think what I'll do is, why don't we push off Aftermath, because it's only coming soon, and Joe and we can talk about that when it's coming out. So we'll finish up with the main topics here with Astro Trash, because I want to talk about this one because it's not a dexterity game. It's still a action game. So Astro Trash, it's something by Usaopoly, who's been throwing out a billion things this year. Truthfully speaking, they've come out swinging. They might have existed before this year, but we've been talking about them a lot because they just keep releasing stuff. So this one is a little interesting one. It's a dice-based game where the object is to get rid of all the trash in front of you, basically little colored items, and you either do that by passing it to the player on your side, either left or right, or throwing it into the sun in front of you. And to determine where it goes, to what color you use, and kind of shapes and things, you roll dice.
Do you know what I have to say about that?
Mm-hmm.
Good news, everybody!
Oh, God. Yes, the Futurama trash ball. But the interesting thing here is you just keep rolling dice. So it's a speed thing of rolling dice in the registering and just moving along until you empty and you can call it. So it's like I guess Spit, like the card game. That's kind of what it reminded me of a little bit, where it's a speed-based card game. But I guess this way it's a speed-based dice game.
Yes.
With little colored trash pieces.
What game is this? Which dice game is this?
Astro Trash.
Astro Trash?
Yeah. The entire concept of there's trash in space hitting your planet, get rid of it, is kind of a little silly. But, I mean, I think most of the time I'm seeing games that involve dexterity nowadays. It's actually dexterity games. This one is, I guess, probably something else. It'd be more again, as I said, speed game, you think you'd call it?
Right.
That might be more appropriate, a title for it, a speed game.
Is it simultaneous? Is everyone playing simultaneously?
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and the object is to be the first one that cleans up your area. So that's kind of cool that it's you're all playing very quickly and fastly. So it's not a long game, well, not necessarily, but it's one of those ones that I described rules in a couple of sentences. There might be some extra little things here and there, but it's not difficult. It's definitely I don't know if I can call it family funny, because I don't know if they're putting it for families necessarily, but
let me see. It says ages 6+.
Okay.
So I'd say that's family friendly.
Don't choke on the small pieces. Please be of an age where you will not. It is 3 to 5 players, so you need at least 3 players though too. And they're only selling it for $20 as the MSRP. That's actually not bad for something quick and simple like that. So, hey. Cool. Let's open our regular segments before we head out for today. Now, normally Joe and I have a couple of regular segments. I think we're going to hit the 2 normal ones we do, which is our Kickstarter Korner, which we like to shout out a Kickstarter to check out. Various from companies of people that we hang out with, things like that. I did not ask, Mark or Rob, do you guys have a ongoing Kickstarter now or something like that? Or do you have one that's coming up or not planning on one for a little while here?
Nothing current. We will be making an announcement so people can tune in. One of the licensed games, we'll make our announcement. We've got a couple of like Facebook groups for like the Lost and SpongeBob, and Rugrats, of course. So that will be coming through our socials within like probably like the next few months in the summer. Yeah.
Okay. Let me know, and I'll shout it on the show here too when it starts up. Joe, did you have like a Kickstarter you wanted to mention?
Sure. This will be a quickie here. I saw a little cool thing. Mm-hmm. There we go. It's in chat. Loot, a magic item deck for 5th edition.
Okay.
So it seems like they've created their own magic items for this too, which is interesting. Okay. And they're the back of the card is full artwork, and then the other side has the information on it: the attunement, name, flavor text, ability. They did number each card so you can do random counters if the GM wants to do random magic item. Mm-hmm. They set it up for you to be able to do that, and also how much the gold value of it is.
Cool.
So it looked interesting. They have 29 days to go. They're $32 out of 5,101.
It sounds like they just started though.
Yeah.
Much.
So they got a little whiles to go, but
keep an eye on it.
Yeah, I think it looks interesting.
For me, I did find one I want to shout out just because it's inspired by like 90s anime like Ghost in the Shell, Bubblegum Crisis, and Cowboy Bebop. It's a Hardwire Island, which is a cyberpunk with like a retro futuristic aesthetic. So you know how I'm a fan for very cyberpunk types of things. I've said it before. And this is inspired by 90s anime, which is I'm a fan of also. So let's put it at that. It's set on a space station in crisis called the Grand Cross. There's like corporations, lots of like problems like street activism, bad things going on, that kind of stuff. It's as I said, retro cyberpunk inspired. They've hit their goal. They were going for like 14,000. They're at 17. 5 days to go. So it's only a little while before they're going to be finished up. So it's definitely capturing a lot of those aesthetics of those like 90s animes with a lot of like these ideas of mega corporations and stuff like that. It's a D6 system. Where you got social interactions, things like hackings, fights that they do have to worry about. They have a wealth system, some cybernetics rules. Missions require prep work, so you actually do have some systems for prepping up missions that you're going to be going on. So that's a neat one. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to that one because that was right up my alley for my RPG genres I love the most. So, all right. So our last regular segment is our week in tabletop. What we did in tabletop this week, if we did anything. Marc or Rob, did you do anything tabletop related this week?
Playtesting.
Yeah, we're playtesting. So we're playtesting one of our kind of deck builder systems. So that's gonna be
Naruto.
Yeah, we're doing Naruto. So it's been cool. lot of shinobi fights over here.
Cool.
Yep.
I guess, Joe, it's pretty much we've been doing things. Why don't you talk about Sunday and I'll talk about the RPGs.
Well, Sunday we didn't do anything this week.
Didn't we? I was sick.
You were sick.
I was sick. And we didn't do anything on Saturday either. Because...
I did something, though, without you.
Okay. There you go.
I played some Dragonfarkle.
Okay, Dragonfarkle. It's fun.
Yeah. I actually had the most epic opening. I fought the dragon for the first time, and I had an item in my hand that gave me 1 free damage, and I rolled double battle axe and damage. So I did 2, and then threw the knife at it and killed it.
Wow.
And it ended up being a very short game. I'm like, okay, and then the next one took the normal amount of time and was not that quick. And I lost. So we ended up both 1-1, so it was fine.
Cool. And then I had my 2 normal RPGs. I had...
Saturday?
We didn't, because we were hanging out and doing some games and stuff like that.
Oh, that's right.
Yep. It was a little get-together at a mutual friend's house. Yeah,
right.
Something different. Which was sad, because that was International Tabletop Day, and I don't think I did anything tabletop-related except talk about it last Saturday.
Nope. And then we didn't do anything on Sunday either, because you unfortunately got sick, so...
Yep. It was the worst weekend, but that also was the problem the weekend we really wanted to do tabletop stuff. But no, Legacies of Kain was fun. They finished their epic battle. They completely defeated their enemy, which the powerful elder vampire. They sort of defeated it. They're making their getaway and ran into someone else that's after the artifact sword they used to do it, which technically they owe to someone else entirely anyway. The entire reason they went on this mission is to keep the sword, because it was needed to kill this, defeat this person, so that they could retrieve it for someone else. Womp womp. And then, of course, in Madness, we had one of our best sessions probably ever, where we had a lot of really good role-playing. You guys finished escorting the Dwarven caravan to their new home. So that was fun.
Yes.
But, cool. So it was a good week in tabletop, and probably be a good one coming up next week. But I think that's a good point for us to end our show with our last little segment bit here, which is more of you people out there. If you ever have any questions for me and Joe, please contact us either at our Twitters, which are shown below us on the video here. You can reach us in chat if you're around here, in the description of our YouTube channel. You can technically email us at discussingtabletop@yahoo.com. You can check out my Discord, and if you have a question for us that we can answer then and there, we will. Or if it's a question that we feel like is appropriate to bring on the show here and talk about it between the two of us, then we'll do it then. But please do that, and thank you for joining us today. I want to give a definite shout out and thank you to Rob, Mark, the two of you, for joining us today, for joining in the conversation, and for definitely letting us know some very interesting things on the ways that Kickstarters work and such.
Absolutely. No, it's a pleasure. Thank you guys again for having us.
Yeah, thanks. It's been
of course.
Yep. Perhaps another day in the future you guys can join us again when you have some kind of project to do, or if you just want to chat with us again. We'd love having you.
For sure, yeah. Just let us know.
Yep. And Joe and I should be back next week. Same time, same place. And if you want to catch us throughout the rest of the week, my schedule is down below for Twitch streaming. It should be Sundays for some tabletop, and then Tuesdays, Thursdays for some role-playing. And anything else, if it shows up for my streaming schedule at this point in time. So, anyway, thanks again. Thanks to everybody who joined us today. And we'll see you next time. And thanks again, Rob, Mark. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you soon.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.